Okay, let's continue on. I mentioned that Hosea was a prophet to the house of Israel. And Hosea was told by God, you got to marry Gomer, who's a prostitute. They have 3 children, the son called Jezreel, a daughter called Lo-Ruhamah, and a daughter called Lo-Ammi. And God told them what to name them. Jezreel means God scatters. Lo-Ruhamah means no mercy. And Lo-Ammi means not my people. Okay, so God through Hosea is showing the house of Israel what is in their future. And that is what happens. Because in 745 BC, they start paying tribute tax to the Assyrian king. The Assyrians came there north of the northern kingdom. But by 722 BC or 721 BC, the Assyrians have come down and taken the house of Israel. They have taken them, they've taken over the land, and they have sent them back to the Assyrian kingdom. They spread them out through the Assyrian Empire. So, exactly what God prophesied through Hosea happened. God scatters them. He has no mercy on them, and he calls them not his people. And this is God giving a bill of divorcement to the house of Israel and sending them out of the house. That's what God did. He divorced the house of Israel. You don't think that he did that? Read Jeremiah 3, I think it's verse 8. Jeremiah was a prophet to the house of Judah. And he talks about, hey, did you not see what God did to your sister Israel? Divorced them? So God divorced the house of Israel, and he sent them out of the house. They're known today as the lost tribes of Israel, because they never came back together as a group. Now, this will help you a little bit. I told you Jonah was a prophet to the house of Israel. And, you know, this is a Bible story that everybody knows. Jonah, the great fish, the whole story. But here's a question for you to contemplate, and you can ask people in your church or whatever. Why did Jonah, when God told Jonah to go to Nineveh, why did he go the opposite direction? And again, you're going to see some higher truth here. Okay, so God tells him to go to Nineveh and tell Nineveh that if they don't repent, God is going to destroy them after 30 days. Jonah goes the other direction. He gets on a boat, he's going the other direction, the winds come up. Again, the whole story, you can read it. He ends up getting tossed over, even though the crew tries to do everything to keep from having to toss him over. But he says, hey, throw me into the water. This storm that came up will go away. Jonah gets thrown in, a great fish. God has created a great fish, prepared a great fish for him. Jonah's in the belly of the fish for 3 days. Has some time to contemplate, everything. And then the great fish, he ends up at Nineveh. And the great fish spits him up on the shore in Nineveh. And again, the higher truth, this is whatever you're doing, it's going to accomplish what God intends, because he ends up on the shores of Nineveh. Well, the Ninevites, and this is where sometimes things get a little confusing, because in the last video I told you that Assyria came down and captured the house of Israel. Well, Nineveh was the capital city of Assyria. That's why Jonah went the other direction, because he was a prophet. He knew what was in the future. And he understood that these people will ultimately come down and take over his people and take them into captivity. And so he wants the Ninevites to die. He wants God to destroy them. That's why he goes the opposite direction. But as it works out, the great fish spits him out on the shores of Nineveh. He gets up as one from the dead and starts going through the streets of Nineveh, preaching that they need to repent. Well, they do. Every single person, from the king all the way down to the street sweeper, they all repent. And when you see the whole picture, you can understand why. They worshiped a fish god, Dagon. So here's a man who rises as if from the dead after he comes out of the mouth of a great fish. So yes, all of this worked together to have Jonah have the greatest preaching experience in history, because his audience all repented. Okay? Well, they repented, and in the fullness of time that they were supposed to, they end up taking over the northern kingdom and sending them into captivity. But as I've already told you in another video, they continue on over the course of time, and it takes a long time. They started in 745 BC, and in 721 BC is when they finally captured Samaria, which was the capital city of the northern kingdom, the house of Israel. So it takes some time. Well, they continue on, and they end up surrounding Jerusalem, because they're going to take over the southern kingdom as well. But this is the story I told you earlier, that they're talking to the people on the wall about, hey, no God's ever stopped us. But God had used them to do what he intended to do to the house of Israel. Okay? Now, so again, that was done. The angel of the Lord slew 185,000 of them. They go back to Assyria. And they didn't even shoot an arrow at the wall of the house of Judah. So Judah continues on. Wow, I'm not getting through this as fast as I want to. So the northern kingdom is no more. The southern kingdom is still there. And I want to get to a couple of things, a couple of points. We'll go on. They go on. And as I've mentioned to you, they're still there. They end up in captivity to the Babylonians for 70 years. And I'm going to tell you a story about that so you don't, so you can see some things in more fullness and more clarity. They have a few good kings, 3 or 4. That's all. At some point, the Babylonians come down. In fact, Hezekiah, who was king when when the when the Assyrians were there, he goes on and keeps being king, and this is when he's sick and he asks God for a sign to show that he's going to get well, and God gives him the sign by making the sun go back 10 steps. Well, some people come down and they're looking over, they're going through the temple, and Hezekiah is showing all this stuff. And Isaiah comes down, and to him it says, "Hey, who were those people?" He said, "I was just showing them the temple, what were, everything in the temple, all the gold, etc." And Isaiah says, "Huh? Well, that's good, because when you're gone, those people are going to come down and they're going to own everything in the temple. Yeah, you got your little bragging session done, but they're going to come down and own it all." And that's what happens. Babylon comes down after Hezekiah dies. Babylon comes down because now they're the power. They've taken over Syria. Babylon comes down, and they've been prophesied. Jeremiah, this is why I tell you, you can't just read everything like it's to you. Jeremiah 29 is a prophecy to the house of Judah about God still has plans for them, because they're about to go into captivity for 70 years. And here's a side point about, you need to be more careful about the way you think about things. When Jesus is on the earth, the house of Judah is, they come back after the Babylonian captivity. And there's so many things that I have to tell you, but I don't want these things to go on and on. So I'm going to pick it up there. We're going to pick it up explaining to you the Babylonian captivity and some things in the New Testament that you'll see more clearly when I talk about this. I love you all.